Right. Hello, everybody. I'm going to give it just another second. It looks like we've now stepped into all the channels out there in YouTube land and LinkedIn land and Instagram land. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the weekly Career Alchemy broadcast coming to you live from my home in the very cold suburbs of Chicago. And every week, almost, I talk about what's on my mind, what's on your mind that you want me to talk about, and often, that I've already blogged about, and then continuing to expand based on the comments that you've given me, the feedback you've given me, and this particular um, uh, talk today that I'm going to do is I'm getting some of the most feedback that I've gotten in a while. So that's, I think, it says something about, I don't know if I don't want, it's like touching a nerve, but it's not really a nerve, but it's people are connecting with it. And so what I'm calling today's conversation is, are you taking the under or the over with your career conversations? So many of you know that if I've reviewed and prepped 1,000 people, I've prepped 50,000 people on job interviews, as a recruiter, helping people get ready for job interviews. How do you answer the question, tell me about yourself, and all of the questions throughout the job interviews, making sure you're ready for the typical ones, and how do you handle ones that take you by surprise. So a good recruiter is really going to set you up for success that way. And as a career coach, I do a lot of the same things, but we're also taking it into the leadership presence, and uh, both from a perspective of leading teams, leading across time zones, presenting to the C-suite. All of it is about, bottom line, the communication and your communication style. And one of the biggest problems that I've seen in communication styles is when someone either takes the under or a person takes the over. So, the under is that you under answer. So it's short, it's vague, it's incomplete answer, and or you're over answering and you're rambling and you're not focused, and much of the information that you're sharing is irrelevant. And so both patterns break connection with the other person. And a broken connection costs you in your career, costs you promotions, costs you raises, costs you the interview, the offer, it costs you, uh, it gets in the way of your ability to you know, influence interviews, but also influence teams and leadership and vendors and all of those things. So let's talk about both the taking of the under, the taking of the over, and then I want to give you a couple of things you can do to help you um, recognize where your style might fit in, and help you to get to that Goldilocks in the middle, that is not too much and not too little. All right. So taking the under. So when someone, like I said, when someone takes the under, their answers are usually short and they're vague. Um, you know, for example, let's say you're on an interview. Everyone's been on an interview, and the person you're talking to is looking at your resume. They're looking at a bullet point on your resume, and they say, "Oh, I see here that you were part of the team that brought in Cloud Code into your software engineering department. Tell me a little bit more about that." And then you respond with, "I led that project," or "It was challenging, but we got it done," or it went really well. So you see what I mean? I always felt as a recruiter like it was just like pulling teeth with some people to get them to expand and expound on something. I led the project, and this is Claude Code, and it's AI, and it's, come on, there's got to be some juice there, right? And so there's just, they there's no detail, there's no context, there's no insight into your impact, and there's also no insight into the impact that this new initiative, once successfully launched, is having on the organization as a whole. Like there's could be very much tied to revenue generation or greater efficiencies, you know, uh, for a team, it just could be more creativity and more ability to work on things that intrigue them and be more innovative. Like so much it could be impacting. And yet the response on the under just doesn't give us any of that. So, and it makes sense. I mean, when a person's under answering, what I know is that often that they, especially women, there may be I don't want to toot my own horn too much. I don't want to brag. I still hear that. It's kind of surprising to me, but I still hear that. I don't want to brag. Another reason is, that they don't have, because they didn't fully prepare ahead of time. They don't have all the details that they can clearly express for the different bullet points on their resume. I always say, if it's a bullet point on your resume, you should be able to talk about all the details. If they ask you about how big was the team and who were the external vendors and what was the project budget and what was the phase one, phase two, you should be able to talk about all of those details. But not over answering, not over detailing. So we'll talk about that too on taking the over, right? But on the under, often there's a lack of preparation ahead of time. So you don't have maybe this project was 4 years ago or 6 years ago, but it's relevant to what this company is doing right now. And you're like, oh, geez, I haven't thought about that project in 6 years. I've heard people answer that way. That's also taking the under. It's a reason why you don't have all the details, but it's also like shuts down the conversation, right? And that's what we're trying not to do. Another reason is that the people think to themselves, I want to be efficient. Like maybe they know that they're an over answerer, and so now the pendulum is swung instead of the Goldilocks in the middle, they've gone all the way to the other side, and they're like really wanting to be efficient, and they're now in underland. So that's a cool word, underland. So they have anxiety perhaps about getting it right. I just want to make sure I'm saying the right things. And trust me, what you say, they will not know if a detail was left out or if you said something slightly incorrectly, as long as it's not a lie, right? Where you then correct it. But if it's like doesn't really matter, then just let it go. Don't try to be so efficient in your words that you're losing again the detail and the impact. And another one I think is also big for women is just years of conditioning not to take up space. Just answer the question as quickly as you can and hope that's enough, or let someone else drive the conversation instead of you being in the driver's seat. And as a coach, for women, part of being fully aligned with the work you're meant to be doing in the world is that you are not afraid to take up space and you want to be in the driver's seat, right? So under answering is a problem because it makes you look less experienced, less capable. And if it feels like, sometimes, and I remember thinking this as when I was interviewing people as a recruiter, is like there would be like, I don't quite believe this dude. Like I don't think that, or man or woman, they're not able to answer about this project. Maybe that bullet point isn't even real. Maybe they made that up, right? So it breaks trust when you're under answering, even though you have the experience, you have the details. And we know that, trust is the currency of successful careers. Just having that trust, right? And when you're in have an opportunity to talk about the impact you've had inside your organization, or even if you're, an external consultant moving in and talking to them about the work you've done for previous clients, you want to build trust as quickly as you can. And by giving some specific details, you can do that. So, and then, back in, as a recruiter, I had a card that I would fill out that would have all the information I needed about the person's background, stuff that I wanted to make sure I asked, right? And I would set aside 40 minutes for the conversation. And invariably, I'd have an under answerer on the call, and we'd be done in 20 minutes. And I'd be sitting here thinking to myself, I really don't know anything about this person. I do not. I have some basic stuff, but especially when we come to look how much space I have for details on these projects and there would be nothing there, right? Or 60 minutes into the conversation, I'd have half of the card filled out where I got to get off the phone and we've gone into no project information because the over answer has, it has filled up the time with irrelevant information. And so let's talk a little bit more about taking the over. If you're like, oh, I'm probably someone who takes the over, right? I definitely skew that way. So, the person who takes, who gives a 7-minute answer to a 30-second response, or necessary response, or 60-second necessary response. So often someone who takes the over gives too many details, is irrelevant details, too complex. So it isn't just the details, but they may give just a few details, but each detail they're going down the rabbit hole, and then this, they want you to understand, and they're assuming you don't. And so they're going to give you all this. So they're making some assumptions, right? And they also, they just follow every thought that comes across their mind instead of staying focused on the question that was asked. It is exhausting for a listener, exhausting, because often too, the person doesn't take a breath. And so there's no easy way to step in for the other half of the conversation. That person can't easily step in because the person, we call it in sales, we call it dumping all your candy in the doorway. It's sort of like you've got all this juicy goodness here on this tray, all these boxes of candy, and then you just dump it. Here it is. Here's all of it, instead of saying, let's just talk about this one. And then let me give you a little more detail about the other side of this box, And so I've forgotten about that. That was I think I might have learned that in Dale Carnegie or something, about don't dump all your candy in the door. And they're talking about a little bit different context, but it definitely is relevant for when you're communicating with your boss or your team or a client or a hiring manager or a recruiter. Don't dump all your candy in the store. I mean, on the floor, on the table, right? Like all at once. So the person who, why a person might over answer, one is they're just nervous, right? We get nervous and that'll either shut us down, so we'll under answer, or we're just talking. I do know, again, as a recruiter, there were, two different types of people. In general, the person who would not say anything because they were formulating thoughts in their head. And then once they got to what they wanted to say, they would say it. but often very concisely. So then it becomes like, tell me more, give me more. Or the person who's heard the question wants to answer the question and keeps talking until they get to the answer. So those, the under answer and the over answer, they're both processing. One's doing it completely quiet, the other person's doing it verbally. And in both cases, it's difficult for the other half of the conversation. So nervous energy, lack of prep. So there's no structure. Again, if you're looking at your resume and you're looking at all of these bullet points or project, status reporting, and you haven't spent some time really understanding all the moving parts to that, and then preparing for how you might talk about it in a concise yet detailed Goldilocks right in the middle way, you're either going to shut down or you're going to just, verbally keep talking and keep talking. So lack of prep ahead of time, lack of structure to how you're going to respond, like that practice is so important. You might be wanting to, especially on an interview, you want to make sure they know everything about you, right? I want them to know everything. I read that job description, and I have so many excellent things that I've done that match the requirements on the job. And I want to make sure they ask me that first question. I want to answer all of these. I want to give them, they had 16 bullet points, and let me give 16 reasons why I match each of those bullet points, when all they were asking about was one. So it's that same sort of, just dumping all your candy on the table at the beginning is wanting to prove yourself, wanting to make sure you give them all the information. You're concerned that you'll run out of time and you'll miss something amazing, not thinking that this person knows exactly how much time this call is necessary for this call, knows exactly the information they need in their part of this interview process, or, whatever it is. And so you can trust that that's been thought through, right? And I'll give you little tips about some things you can do when we talk about the Goldilocks method. So the other thing is a person might not be fully sure what the interviewer is asking, or what their boss is asking them. When I say interviewer, it's anyone that's asking you questions, right? And wanting some information from you. And so they're not quite sure, so they just answer something. They're afraid to ask for clarify to have the question clarified because they don't want to appear incompetent. And so then, things go off the rails, right? Or I talked about not preparing enough, but the other side to that is they're over prepared, and so they're so scripted that they're not listening. They're not fully present in this conversation right now because they know what they've got it. I know what I'm going to say. I know what's important. And, if I can, whatever that question is, I'm going to figure out how to say this stuff. So, why it's a problem, we talked about why it was a problem to under answer, because you look less capable, less experienced, and it's, it doesn't build trust very well. But an over answer looks unfocused, unaware, doesn't have the career presence and leadership presence that perhaps they're looking for. And again, you come off as not being capable. So so we've talked about the under, we've talked about the over answering, we've talked about why they're problems, why you actually might do them, the natural response for anxiety and nervous energy, and wanting the job so bad or wanting to impress the person so much. We've talked about why we might do that, but now how do we correct for the taking the under or taking the over? And that's what I call my career communication Goldilocks method. I'm all for a fairy tale metaphor, right? So you know the story of Goldilocks and the three bears. Hopefully, she comes into the bear's cottage. They aren't there. She lays down in the beds and she tries the first bed and it's like, oh no, this one's too hard. And the next one's too soft. And the third one is just right. She's eating the porridge, right? This is too hot. This is too cold. This one's just right. Same with the chairs. And so that's what we're talking about, is getting to that middle, that Goldilocks middle of, which is super powerful, grounded, centered. You're expressing, it's clear, it's concise, it's complete, so you're not feeling like that you wish you would have said more, or that you said too much. It's very audience aware. And I think that's something that is really important when we're talking about communication, is the audience awareness, being aware of the audience. And it's also confident. So it's not too much, it's not too little, it's just right. So let me give you two tools you can use, two ways to bring your communication into the Goldilocks middle. So the first one's what I call the 3-sentence rule. So for example, the 3 sentences, they ask you a question, and all you need to remember is you want to give them context, you want to give them the contribution that you and your team made, and you want to give a conclusion that shows the impact. So, the context is, this was the situation, this was what was happening. The contribution is, this is what I did, this is what my team did. I love including the team, giving the team credit where credit is due. So this is what happened and how we did it. And then this was the impact that it had. Very simple: context, contribution, and conclusion. Or what happened, what was involved, and what was the impact. So that gives a very complete answer. And here's the bonus pro tip that I said I would mention, is once you give the context, the contribution, and the conclusion, you can then say, I can go into more detail on any part of this if you would like. So I always talk, when I'm coaching, I talk about it as like passing the ball back and forth. So they've passed the ball to you with the question. You respond with context, contribution, and conclusion. And then you end with, and I can go into more detail if you like. Here's the ball back to you. You decide, you direct where we're going next. And the beauty of this, the magic of that particular ending of, I can go into more details if you like on any aspect of what I talked about, is that it shows awareness. It's a very confident response, but it also gives an opportunity to redirect. Because the truth of the matter is that the question that they asked could have many answers. If you're not sure which way they want you to go, ask the clarity question. That also shows confidence. Say, do you want me to respond with regards to this or that? And then respond. So you've gotten a little bit of clarity, and then go back to the context, the contribution, and the conclusion. And then say, I can go into any more details if you like. And then, so if, for example, they ask the question and you think you completely understand their question, and so you don't think that you need to ask any clarifying questions, you just go, you answer confidently. Here's the context, here's the contribution that was made, the things that we did to make it successful, and here's the impact it had for myself, for my team, for the organization. You respond, and then you say, and I'd be happy to go into more details if you like. And they say, love that answer, but really what I was getting at was this. And now they can redirect. And because you didn't spend, literally that takes for, 90 seconds, maybe 120 seconds. You didn't take 10 minutes to answer that question, and you didn't also give so little context that they don't even know if you did know what the question was. You've given them enough information so they can redirect it and get where they want to go, and you've given them some good stuff for them to work with, but it hasn't wasted so much time that they're frustrated that you didn't answer the question that they intended, right? So that's the first one. The three C's: context, contribution, conclusion, just the three sentences. And then the second one that I want to talk about is one that most people hate. They're like, I don't have time for that. But I can tell you, if you do it, it's gold. It is Alchemist Gold. Speaking of Career Alchemy Academy. Oh, I've got this screen on. I'm going to switch screens for you all because I created a new screen with a bigger QR code to make it even easier for you to find out the details of joining Career Alchemy Academy. And I was so excited to have that background on, and then I went through most of this call without it, but doesn't matter. We have arrived. So back to what we were talking about. So you see how I went off on a tangent? That's what I'm saying. I lean a little that way, but I can always bring us back. So let's talk about the 2-minute exercise. So it's, like I said, it's something that that gives you alchemist gold. It can transform who you are as a leader, transforms your communication style into a Goldilocks communication style. It transforms how you communicate, how you lead, your presence. It will add to your confidence, all of those things. So even though we resist this more than anything, it's worth doing. And and it gives you like immediate feedback on whether you're someone who goes on the under, goes on the over, goes between both of them, or is right in that sweet spot already. And it's to record and time yourself responding to common questions you might get, like, tell me about a recent accomplishment that you're proud of. That might be an interview question. Or give us the status update on project ABC, right? And so now you record yourself, and then you ask yourself, get a little critical with yourself in a good way. Like, did I answer that question fully? Did I ramble? Did I under answer? Did I over answer? Did I give my impact? Will someone know the impact that I'm giving? How long did that take specifically? Or how short was it? How long was it? So all of that can give you like listening to yourself, and recording yourself and listening to yourself just brings the awareness you need so that you can adjust. And it's really good prep for important, talks you're giving, presentations, again, interviewing. It's if you're going to prepare, recording yourself responding to common questions that they'll probably ask you couldn't be a better way to prepare. It's next to a mock interview with someone like me. In Career Alchemy Academy, we can do live mock interviews during our on our coaching days on Tuesdays, which are our Career Alchemy Academy coaching days. And that is amazing. But also just recording yourself on your phone. You can also record not only your voice, but you could record how you look, because we can have idiosyncrasies. I talk a lot with my hands. I move a lot when I talk. And now that I've been doing more LinkedIn Lives, I'm more and more aware of that. And so I'm hopeful that if you started watching me at the beginning of when I don't know how long ago now, months and months ago, that I started doing LinkedIn Lives to today, that you'll see that I've slowed down some, that I'm, though I still talk with my hands, I actually hold onto something to help me stay focused. So then I'm only using one hand, and keeps me facing forward. So I have something that I hold in front of me like this. Plus sometimes notes are on it and things, which are also helpful. But in any case, so communication isn't about giving more or giving less, but it's about giving what's needed to create the communication, giving what's needed to fulfill the listener's desire, what's useful for the listener. That's what you're trying to do. And if you stop taking the under or the over and find that Goldilocks style, you're going to naturally stand out as a grounded, thoughtful, present, powerful, aligned communicator. And again, we know that that builds trust, trust being currency. That's going to get you those promotions faster, get you those offers, attract the people that you want to your teams. They're going to be asking to work with you, get those glamour projects that you want. All of that can happen more quickly when you practice how you communicate your experience, your impact, and the information that they need in order to make really good decisions. So that's it for today. That's our talk on taking the under, taking the over in career conversations, and how they, when you get into the Goldilocks middle, that your impact increases and your career can go in all the directions that you want to take it. So that's it for today. Follow the giant QR code that I've now created just for you so that you can join Career Alchemy Academy. Don't wait anymore. We're having an amazing group of women in there talking about all kinds of things in technology, and also doing some of the magical, leaning into our spiritual intelligence and, accessing that part of us that really knows, that inner knowing, and not denying that. So the alchemy of a career is really the balancing of the practical, tactical, strategic with the magical, what I call spiritual intelligence that we all have, that inner knowing, intuition, wise guidance. So thank you for today. And right now, I am planning to be here every Wednesday in February at this time, 1 o'clock Central Time. I don't have any plans to be out of the office. Oh, yes, I do. Oh, no, I don't. Oh, yes, I do. Next Wednesday, I'll be at a different time. So just look and see what that time is. We send out emails about it, or in my newsletter, sign up for the newsletter. You can find that out. Check on LinkedIn, all of those things. Talk to you soon.